The galaxy groaned. In the silence between stars, reality itself began to crack, not with the shriek of the warp, but with something far older. A golden wound tore open in the void, spilling light unlike any known in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. It was not holy nor profane. It was alive. From that wound, a figure fell. Wrapped in solar flame, brighter than a dying sun, he tore through the void like a comet of divine fury. Planets shuddered as he passed. Astropaths screamed, feeling something that should not exist. Power beyond comprehension, yet not of the warp. The light faded, and for a heartbeat, the stars themselves seemed to bow. Then silence. He drifted among the remains of forgotten satellites and cold debris, motionless, suspended in the black sea of eternity. And though no tongue in this universe had ever spoken his name, it echoed in the fabric of existence itself. Sentry, a being of light and madness, a man who was once a god, or a god who once believed he was a man. And now he had fallen into a galaxy that knew only one truth, that there is no peace, only war. Far below, on the fringes of the segmentum pacificus, an imperial outpost watched the heavens. Their scanners, corroded by centuries of decay, flickered to life. A single dot appeared, glowing, descending, alive. To the weary soldiers of the Imperium, it was a miracle. A second sun blazing against the eternal night. They fell to their knees, their cracked voices trembling with hope. The Emperor, he has sent us a sign. For years they had fought nameless wars, rebels, xenos, and horrors born of the warp. Faith was their only shield. Hope, their only weapon. So when the sky burned gold, they did not question. They simply believed. The Adeptus Ministorum declared it divine intervention. The astropaths sent word to terror. Even the Mechanicus whispered of a celestial anomaly beyond logic or data. Across 1,000 systems, sermons were spoken, hymns were sung. They called him the Emperor's Angel, a savior descending to purge the heretic, the mutant, and the unclean. But what fell upon that desolate world was not an angel, not a servant of the Emperor, nor a weapon of the warp. It was something else entirely, something that the galaxy was never meant to contain. And as his burning body pierced the clouds and crashed into the iron deserts below, the soldiers cheered through their tears, unaware that they had just witnessed not salvation, but the beginning of another reckoning. When the fire died, the crater still burned. Metal melted into rivers of gold, sand turned to glass. And at the center, among the smoking ruin, a man rose, or something that looked like one. His skin glowed faintly, like sunlight behind a storm. His eyes were not human eyes. They were stars contained within a mortal frame. Every breath shimmered with power. Every movement hummed with energy that bent the air around him. But his mind was fractured, memories blurred and broken like shards of glass reflecting 1,000 lives. He remembered falling. He remembered her. A voice calling his name across time. And then nothing. He looked around and saw a world that knew only ash, black skies, burning machines, bodies marked with the sign of a god he did not know. He heard them whisper through the smoke, an angel of the Emperor. He didn't understand. He didn't know their wars, their creeds, their gods of iron and blood. He only felt the ache of something vast inside him, something he could not name, a storm trapped in a fragile shell. He raised a trembling hand, and light bloomed. The ground healed beneath his feet. Ruined steel grew warm. The dying gasped as breath returned to their lungs. The soldiers fell silent, their eyes filled with tears. They had prayed for a miracle, and he had answered. But to Sentry, it was no miracle. It was instinct, reflex, the same way one might breathe. He felt their fear turn to worship, their awe to devotion. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the brilliance of his light, a whisper stirred. Quiet, patient, and dark, they will love you now, and hate you later. Sentry looked to the sky, the storm of smoke swirling above him. He didn't yet know what world he had fallen into. He didn't yet know the gods watching him from beyond the veil. But even then, even in confusion and pain, one truth echoed within him. Where light exists, shadow always follows. Days passed, or maybe it was weeks. Time meant nothing to him. He walked through the wastelands of that broken planet, guided not by purpose, but by the pull of pain. Where suffering called, he followed. Everywhere he went, the dead refused to stay dead. Wounds sealed under the warmth of his hands, metal bones fused, shattered armor reformed. Even the air seemed to breathe again, cleansed of rot and poison. Villages forgotten by the Imperium saw the skies clear for the first time in generations. Children born sick opened their eyes to sunlight they had never known, and the people, broken, starving, lost, began to believe once more. They called him Saint Solaris, the golden angel, the living sun. Pilgrims came from far across the deserts carrying relics and hopes like offerings. They knelt before him, whispering prayers he did not understand. But their faith, he could feel it. It pressed on him like gravity, pulling at the corners of his mind. Their worship gave him warmth, but also weight. Every act of kindness lit a spark in the darkness of the warp. Every miracle echoed through the Imperium like a song, and far beyond mortal sight, that song was heard. The priests of the ecclesiarchy declared his coming a sign of divine renewal. "An angel of the Emperor walks among us," they cried. The Adeptus Mechanicus sent their emissaries to study him, to record the pulse of his light, to trap it in their data prayers. But Sentry refused them all. He sought no temple, no crown, no glory. He healed because he had to, because something inside him needed to mend what was broken, even if he could not mend himself. He stood on the ruins of an old manufactorum and looked to the burning horizon. War thundered there, endless and loud, and he could feel its pain as if it were his own. "If I can stop this, even a little," he whispered, "then maybe I still deserve to exist." The wind carried his words into the void, and somewhere beyond the veil the whisper answered, soft, amused. "You think you can save them all?" He closed his eyes, unaware that his light had already touched the warp, unaware that in healing a dying world he had awakened far darker things watching from the endless night. Because in the 41st millennium, mercy is not a blessing. It is a signal. And the gods had just seen it. In the silence beyond stars, things began to move. Not ships, not men, but shadows, ancient, watching, hungry. The warp stirred. It did not welcome the light. It recoiled. For this light was not born of faith, nor demon, nor any god it could name. It was something foreign, something pure, and purity, in the eye of terror, was an insult. The Imperium rippled with unrest. The souls of dead psychers screamed through the veil, their essence burning under a brilliance they could not endure. And far deeper, within the thrones of chaos, the gods turned their gaze. Khorne, lord of rage, snarled. "Another challenger. Another fool who would burn my battlefield clean." Nurgle shuddered with laughter. Light fades. Everything rots in the end. "Even suns die." Tzeentch leaned forward, his ever-shifting face curling into a smile of 1,000 meanings. "Ah, a variable I did not write. A flame without origin. A paradox born outside the plan." And Slaanesh, the whisperer in the dark, said nothing. It only smiled, feeling the tremor of something deeper within the light.
A second heartbeat.
A hidden pulse of desire, fear, and self-hatred. The warp gods saw it clearly, what Sentry could not.
Inside his radiant soul was a fracture.
A wound shaped like hunger, and from that wound, something stirred. Back on the mortal plane, Sentry knelt beside a wounded guardsman, his hand glowing softly. The man's breathing steadied. His heart began to beat again. But as Sentry healed him, a shadow passed behind his eyes. A flicker, a second reflection. The guardsman's smile froze. For an instant, he saw the face of something else in the golden light.
Something darker.
Something smiling. That night the survivors dreamed. They saw the sun bleeding black. They saw a man of gold and shadow standing between two galaxies, torn in half by his own light. And they woke screaming. In the warp, the laughter of the gods rolled like thunder. The light had announced itself, and they would not ignore it, for in this universe, every miracle has a price.
And every savior
Casts a shadow. The dreams spread, first among the soldiers he saved, then among the pilgrims who followed him, and soon among entire worlds that spoke his name. They called him Saint Solaris, the golden deliverer, the living flame. But behind every prayer, behind every hymn of praise, the whisper grew louder, a quiet pulse of darkness hidden beneath devotion, like oil beneath water. Sentry walked among the faithful, blessing the wounded, guiding the lost. Every act of compassion burned brighter, and with it the other voice stirred. Soft at first, like breath against his ear. You can do more than heal them, Robert.
You can make them better, perfect, eternal. He froze when he heard his name.
It had been so long since anyone had spoken it. Not in this world.
Not in this galaxy. Who are you?
He whispered into the wind. But the wind did not answer. Only the faint echo of his own heart, and something beating beside it. The dreams grew darker. The people began to change. Those who followed him started carving suns into their flesh. They lit fires that never went out. They wept with joy and madness.
They said the light was speaking to them.
They said it had two voices. The Inquisition took notice. Agents whispered of a new cult spreading across the sector, one that worshipped a being of light and fear. The faithful called it revelation. The Imperium called it heresy, and Sentry, he called it wrong. He began to sense it. A weight behind his thoughts, a presence pacing just out of sight. It spoke when he was weak. It laughed when he was kind.
And every time he doubted himself, it grew stronger. He tried to contain it.
He meditated. He buried his power. He stopped healing, stopped shining, stopped being. But the galaxy would not let him rest. They prayed harder. They begged louder.
And faith fed the fire. Until one night, under a sky torn by auroras of golden and black flame, he saw it, reflected in the broken glass of his own visor.
A shape behind him made of shadow and smoke wearing his face.
Eyes red as dying stars. Voice deep as the void itself. You call yourself light, it said. But I am what you've buried. I am what you fear.
You can heal their wounds, but I can heal your weakness. And in that instant, Sentry remembered the truth he had tried to forget. The void, his eternal counterpart, had followed him here. It had crossed universes with him, bound by fate, by balance, by the very structure of his soul. The light had come to a galaxy drowning in darkness.
But darkness
had come with it. The whispers reached Terra. Across the miles of dust and stars, the name Saint Solaris carried through astropathic choirs like an infection made of light. It cut across sanctioned transmissions, wrapped itself in sermons, and arrived at the feet of the high lords of Terra. They listened, stone-faced, as the choirs screamed and burned. Reports spoke of a radiant man healing worlds, raising the dead, and gathering worship faster than any saint before him. Hope was spreading, and hope was dangerous. The Inquisition moved first. Ordo Hereticus deemed the phenomenon divine contamination. 3 warships left Terra under silence protocols, their holds heavy with Sisters of Battle and Exorcist tanks blessed for planetary purgation. On the desolate world where Sentry walked, the sky split again, this time with thunder, not light. Dropships fell like judgment. Pilgrims scattered, screaming as imperial banners descended through ash. Sentry stood among them, calm, unsure. He watched soldiers in golden armor form firing lines around the very people he had saved.
A voice boomed through vox amplifiers. "By decree of the Holy Synod, you are charged with heresy.
No man may claim the Emperor's light. Kneel, so that your soul may be measured." He did not kneel. He stepped forward, palms open, his glow soft and warm. "I seek no throne," he said quietly.
"I am not your emperor."
But I remember his pain. The first bolt round struck his chest. It vaporized before it touched him. The second never fired. Its weapon melted, the metal running like wax in the soldier's hands. The battlefield froze. The Inquisitor watched the man before him surrounded by swirling light, untouched, unarmed, unafraid. In that stillness, everyone felt it. The weight of something beyond God or demon. Faith bent under it. Fear bloomed. The Inquisitor fell to his knees, not in worship, but in dread, and high above, on Terra's golden throne, a dying emperor stirred for the briefest instant. Through the storms of the warp, he saw the newcomer's flame, and though his mouth could no longer form words, his mind whispered into the void. "He carries the same wound I do." Below, Sentry turned his gaze skyward, feeling eyes upon him across eternity. He wondered if he had just met his maker or his mirror. The ships withdrew to orbit, uncertain. The pilgrims began to chant, and deep inside Sentry's fractured soul, the darkness smiled. For in the Imperium of man, there is no such thing as a savior, only another reason to burn. The day after the purge that never came, the skies of the dying world still smoked. Pilgrims huddled near the ruins of their shrines, whispering prayers to a being who stood among them like living sunlight dimmed by grief. Orbiting above, the Ordo Hereticus fleet waited. They had seen him walk through fire. They had seen weapons turn to dust at his touch. They wanted proof. What manner of being could defy both faith and physics?
An envoy descended.
Inquisitor Mariel Kane, scarred by 100 purges, stepped out in burnished armor. Around her, Sisters of Battle formed a ring of flame and steel. Sentry waited.
No weapons, no threat.
Just the endless calm of someone who had forgotten how to be afraid. Kane's voice cut through the wind. "Identify yourself. By whose will do you act?" He looked at her, golden eyes dimmed to ember. "By none."
"I act because I must."
"Because life screams to be saved." Her gauntlet clenched. "No man saves without purpose. You heal, yet you draw worship."
"That is corruption." He tilted his head, the faintest trace of sorrow crossing his face. "If compassion is corruption, then your emperor was the first sinner." The words struck like thunder.
The sisters raised their weapons. Then, something impossible. Kane lowered her hand. She felt it. Not psychic influence.
Not deception.
Just truth, raw and unfiltered. The kind of truth the Imperium had long buried beneath creed and fear. Her vox crackled with orders from orbit. Contain him. Destroy him if necessary. But her mouth refused to obey. She turned off the channel. "You are not human," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "But neither are you, not anymore." For a long moment neither moved. Around them the air shimmered, not from heat, but from tension between two powers that defined belief itself. Then Cain did something she had never done in all her years as an inquisitor. She bowed her head. If you are false, the Emperor will judge you. If you are true, then may he forgive us for doubting. Sentry reached out, touching the sigil on her armor. It glowed softly, and for a heartbeat the metal sang. I do not seek judgment, he said, only understanding. As she turned to leave, she looked back once more. Understanding is a dangerous thing here, Saint Solaris. It can burn empires to ash. He watched her depart, knowing she was right. For the light he carried had already begun to burn, and somewhere far away the shadows were learning to move again. Night fell, and silence took the world. The flames of the ruined outpost had long since died, leaving only ash and whispers. Sentry remained among the broken stones, his light dimmed, his thoughts heavy. The people slept in shallow peace, unaware that the true storm had already begun. In the still air, the whisper returned. It was faint, patient, and cold. No sound came from the earth or the wind.
It came from within. His name was spoken by a voice that was his own. Robert.
They do not love you. They fear you. He stood motionless, his eyes closed, his breath unsteady. The light around him flickered, its purity disturbed. They will call you Savior until you fail to save them. Then they will crucify you for what you are. The words pressed deeper, wrapping around his mind like chains. The ground beneath him darkened, shadows bleeding from his feet. The golden aura that once healed had begun to waver, tinged with black. A memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp, faces from another world.
A war fought against himself.
A death that never stayed dead. The whisper continued. You remember me now, don't you? You remember what we became. The stars above pulsed, and the void seemed to answer. The darkness that had followed him from another universe was waking. It had watched, waiting, feeding on doubt, on faith, on fear. Sentry's voice trembled. You should not be here. I never left, the whisper replied.
You brought me. The words lingered in the cold air.
He felt it, the pull of balance, of two forces destined never to part. The light was meant to heal, but now it had been stained. The darkness was patient. It was listening. Somewhere beyond the veil, the warp stirred again. The gods laughed quietly, their amusement hidden behind the roar of distant storms.
A fracture had opened, not in the galaxy, but in a soul. And as Sentry knelt among the ashes of his miracles, the universe itself began to hold its breath.
For the light that had come to heal creation was beginning to turn against itself. The first tremor was felt in the void. Ships stationed in orbit reported distortion, sensors blinded by brilliance.
No warning was given, no command received.
Reality itself had begun to ripple outward from the planet's surface. Sentry stood at the epicenter. The whisper inside him had grown louder, clearer, more certain. The air trembled around his form. His light, once steady and warm, became wild and unbound. Winds of raw energy tore across the wasteland, lifting ash and metal into spirals of flame. The faithful gathered, drawn by the sight. They fell to their knees, arms raised, their voices lost beneath the rising hum of power. Their prayers were swallowed by a storm that had no beginning and no end. He tried to hold it back. His hands were clenched. His breath came heavy and uneven. But every attempt at restraint only tore the veil wider. His power was no longer answering him. It was answering everything. Light flooded the sky. The planet's crust shuddered as if struck by a divine hammer. Machines hundreds of miles away came alive, their cogitators sparking with holy fire. Astropaths across nearby systems screamed as their minds were seared by radiance. The warp responded in kind. The Imperium was split open by waves of illumination. For a fleeting moment, Demons burned as if caught in the heart of a newborn sun. Their forms dissolved into dust, their essence silenced. The light of Sentry's soul had reached into their domain, and they hated it. The storm spread across the sector.
Navigation failed.
Warp routes shattered. An entire fleet vanished in the glare. Engines melted, crews reduced to vapor. No enemy had done this.
No god had planned it.
The light itself had rebelled against creation. Sentry's voice was heard only once in that blinding storm. I did not mean this. But the words were carried away, lost in the roar of collapsing heavens. The faithful who survived spoke of the storm as a vision of the Emperor's mercy. The Inquisition called it a weapon of blasphemy. And far beyond mortal hearing, in the cold silence of the warp, something ancient was stirred awake. A challenge had been issued to the darkness, and darkness, as it always does, would answer. The warp rippled. What had been silent turned alive with rage. The brilliance that had flooded it left scars, trails of burning gold etched into the fabric of madness. It was not forgotten. It was not forgiven. From the blood-soaked throne, corner was stirred. The roar of battle echoed in his endless halls, but it was the light that drew his fury. A storm not born of blood had dared to wound his domain. Across the warp, his voice was felt rather than heard. Let the false sun bleed, and armies moved without command. Demons formed from vapor and hate began their march. Rivers of crimson flame carried them toward the tear between worlds. A new war was being born in the space between belief and defiance. Sentry was unaware. He stood alone among the ruins of what his power had undone. The storm had ended, leaving behind silence thicker than grief. The bodies of those who had called his name were still, their faces turned toward heaven as if in worship. He had saved them once, and now they were gone. Above him, reality split again. Not golden this time, but black and burning red. Through the wound, the first of Khorne's legions descended. Brass armor dripped with molten rage. Chains sang.
Axes burned.
The ground beneath them hissed, as if scorched by living hate. No warning was spoken. No words were exchanged. The demons charged, and their war cries filled the void. Blades met the dust, and the dust caught fire. Sentry did not run. The light within him rose again, slower this time, heavier. Each step he took was followed by tremors. Every movement tore the air apart, and when his fist struck the first demon, it was not flesh that met metal. It was creation striking back at its own corruption. Demons vanished in bursts of heat and silence. Their ashes turned to glass in the wind. Still they came, thousands upon thousands, driven by a will older than time. Each cut they landed healed before blood could form. Each wound they inflicted only deepened his glow. The warp screamed. The demons burned, but the echo of another voice whispered behind the carnage. "You cannot destroy them all, Robert. You can only join them." The void had begun to wake. It watched the slaughter, amused, waiting for the light to falter. And when it did, the universe would learn what true horror meant. Not from chaos, but from balance undone. The sky burned without horizon. The battlefield became a mirror of madness, reflecting both light and ruin. Sentry stood at its center, a figure forged from the fury of a dying sun. The demons advanced, endless and roaring, yet they were met with silence. Every motion of his hand reshaped the air. Waves of energy spread outward, erasing legions that had never known fear. Each blast of light carried warmth that killed, mercy that annihilated. What had once been a healer had become judgment given form. It was said that the void between stars turned gold that day. Ships drifting near the edge of the sector recorded nothing but static and brightness. Their crews wept, blinded, as a voice filled their minds, calm, sorrowful, infinite, You called me to save you.
I cannot stop. On the planet below, the demons dissolved into ash.
Their armor melted, their blades faded to smoke. The winds themselves ignited, carrying their screams into the void. The ground was remade, smooth and glass-like, stretching into the horizon like a sea of molten light. The warp trembled. Its fabric resisted, bending and twisting to contain what had been unleashed. For the first time, chaos felt fear not of power, but of purity. The essence of war itself recoiled from the thought of peace made weapon. And yet, within that perfect radiance, shadows lingered. The whisper did not fade. It was patient, steady, and close. You see how easy it is?
To end the suffering, you only have to keep burning. His eyes closed.
His hands trembled. The light grew brighter until color itself began to vanish. He felt everything at once. The screams of dying demons, the fading souls of those he had tried to save, the laughter of something deep within. Then it came, the stillness before collapse.
All that energy, all that light drawn inward.
His body could no longer contain it.
His will no longer commanded it.
The storm turned silent. The world bent inward. When the light returned, it was not alone. A darker shape stood beside him, formed from smoke and memory. It wore his outline, spoke with his voice. Its presence was heavy, patient, inevitable. I am what follows every sunrise, it said.
You called me, Robert.
You always do. The glow around Sentry dimmed. The air shivered as if the universe itself had inhaled. Balance had shifted, and the first breath of the void had been taken. The battle was over. The war within had begun. Silence followed the storm. The ashes of demons drifted through the air like dying embers, dim against the brilliance that still clung to the sky. Sentry stood unmoving, his golden light fading to pale. Before him the shadow took shape. It was not summoned. It was remembered. Born from his own reflection, sculpted from every fear he had buried and every doubt he had denied. The void was not a stranger, it was a promise fulfilled. Its form wavered between smoke and solid, its eyes twin abysses that devoured light. You heal, but you destroy, the shadow said. You call yourself a savior, but you never ask who must pay the cost. The words had no sound, yet they were felt. The ground cracked beneath their weight. Sentry's glow flickered, his hands shaking as if under unseen chains. The two halves of one soul faced each other, their struggle unseen by any mortal. The air darkened around them, not from nightfall, but from balance undone.
A single heartbeat passed, and then the void moved. It struck with no sound. Light and shadow collided, and the sky screamed.
Every storm, every fracture, every scar of the warp answered. Their battle was not waged with weapons, but with will. Every thought became fire, every doubt a blade. Across the void, the gods of chaos watched and understood too late that a new force had entered their dominion. A creation that neither served nor defied them, it simply was. And as their conflict tore through the veil between realities, an entire sector was consumed in a lightless blaze. Planets became echoes and stars turned cold. In the heart of that nothingness, two voices spoke as one. We are what the other cannot live without. When the storm subsided, the galaxy was left wounded. What had once been a single war-torn system became a scar across space itself, half bathed in radiant gold, half drowned in endless shadow. Ships that drifted too close were torn apart by the pull of both forces. It was said that the warp screamed and the materium wept. Two realities had begun to overlap, neither dominant, neither dying. Time slowed, stretched, folded upon itself. Even the stars flickered, uncertain which side of creation they belonged to. The Imperium declared the region forbidden. No ship was to enter, no signal to be sent. Yet the faithful whispered prayers to the glowing half of the scar, while cults worshipped the darkness that mirrored it. To one, he was salvation incarnate. To the other, he was the void reborn. From his fractured being, two legends were born. The Golden Guardian, bringer of mercy and flame. The shadow beyond stars, devourer of light and will. Both were Sentry, and neither were whole. Across the warp, demons fed upon the chaos he left behind. Among mortals, prophets rose and fell, each claiming to know his purpose. And high upon terror's throne, the Emperor felt a flicker of something familiar, a reflection of his own fractured eternity. No victor was known, no ending written. The universe had been divided not by gods or war, but by a man who had forgotten how to be one. And in the quiet that followed, the balance waited, because light and darkness were never meant to stand apart forever. Soon they would seek each other again, and when they met, creation itself would hold its breath. Across the void, the echoes of the storm reached terror. The Astronomicon flickered, its sacred flame dimmed beneath a pulse of alien light. Astropath screamed as the signal of the Emperor's beacon faltered, then steadied, as if another presence had brushed against it. The custodian stood watch in uneasy silence. Something had touched the throne's light, something not born of man or demon. Within the silent hall of the Golden Throne, the Emperor's mind stirred. Dreams that had long ceased to exist returned, filled with visions of another like him. A soul divided, a god trapped within the limits of flesh. Through the endless machinery that bound his dying form, he felt it, a heartbeat that was not his, a light that burned too bright to belong to the warp. No word escaped his lips, for they had long been dust, but his thoughts reached into the immaterium like a whisper through eternity. He carries the wound of creation.
As I once did. Across the galaxy, the faint echo of his will brushed against Sentry.
For a moment, the golden light faltered, and the shadow paused. The Emperor's awareness had touched him like one dying star recognizing another. In that fragile instant, neither god nor man held dominion. The light wavered, the darkness recoiled, and all of creation shivered at the thought of two broken divinities staring across time at one another. It was not a meeting. It was a reflection, one fallen world seeing itself in another's ruin. The silence did not last. In the void where the two halves of Sentry existed, movement returned. The light sought to mend, the shadows sought to consume. The space between them folded, stretched, and broke. They met again. There were no witnesses, no sky, no ground, only existence unraveling. Every blow they traded tore holes through the fabric of both realms. Stars turned cold. The warp shrieked. Reality trembled under the weight of their balance denied. Light struck shadow, and worlds died in the wake. Shadow embraced light, and the echoes of suns were devoured. Every strike was a memory. Every wound, a confession. The void spoke first. You were made to save.
Yet you destroy. The light answered, you were born from me. Yet you devour everything I love. The collision of their words birthed storms that bled through the galaxy.
Across distant systems, warp drives failed, and night became endless. The gods of chaos turned their gaze away, for they understood that this was no longer their war. This was creation judging itself. The duels stretched beyond time. A single moment lasted 1,000 years. Neither side triumphed.
Neither surrendered.
The cosmos itself began to dim, weary of their defiance, and then, in that endless void, realization dawned. They were not enemies, they were incomplete. Two halves of one will, warring against the truth. that both must exist. The final strike was never thrown. The light opened its arms. The shadow did not resist. They met, and silence followed. The explosion that came after was without sound, without color. Only the faint pulse of a new harmony lingered, a single heartbeat that echoed through the dying stars. And as the light faded, the galaxy breathed again. It had survived them, but it would never forget. When the storm ended, silence took its place. The universe hung suspended, as though creation itself had stopped to watch what remained. All that had been light and all that had been shadow now drifted together in the stillness. The battlefield of reality was gone. Only a field of stars remained, faint and trembling. Sentry floated within that endless calm. His body had been shattered and rebuilt 1,000 times. His soul was no longer divided by rage or mercy. The line between the golden flame and the endless void had thinned until it vanished. The voice that had once taunted him now spoke softly. We cannot destroy one another. We are the same wound, wearing two faces. He felt it in every particle of his being, the truth that balance demanded coexistence.
He had tried to banish his darkness.
He had fought to cage it. But light without shadow was blindness, and shadow without light was oblivion. The galaxies around him spun slower, drawn to his stillness. Demons fell silent in their worlds of blood and rust. Warp storms collapsed upon themselves, drained of fury. Even the Emperor's distant flame flickered, sensing what had been decided. A choice had been placed before him. He could end the conflict by erasing himself, extinguishing both halves together, or he could accept what he was and bind them, light and void, mercy and wrath, into one. His answer required no words. The breath he drew became the pivot upon which two realities turned. His aura dimmed, then brightened, not with fire, but with stillness. Light and darkness folded inward, merging into a single, steady glow that neither blinded nor burned. The warp quieted. The materium steadied. A balance that had never existed before was made real. Across the distant stars, creatures of every creed and color felt it, a peace that frightened them, a calm that felt like judgment. And in that moment a new kind of silence was born, not of death or fear, but of harmony. Sentry's voice, carried through what was left of time, spoke once more. I will not choose between what I am.
I will be both.
And I will protect this balance even from myself. The light of that vow passed through every realm, soft and steady as the breath of a dying god. And where it touched the void, stars were seen to awaken once more. When the last echo of the storm faded, the galaxy was changed. The stars that had burned cold began to stir again, their light restored by the quiet pulse that lingered across creation.
No flare, no explosion, just the slow, measured return of life to a universe that had forgotten how to breathe. From the heart of that calm, the figure of Sentry drifted.
His form no longer glowed with fury, nor bled with shadow. He simply was, a being suspended between creation and erasure. His presence neither scorched nor healed, it balanced. The warp fell silent for the first time in uncounted ages. Its tides, once wild and screaming, softened to a whisper. Demons withdrew to the edges of unreality, confused by a peace that was not born of conquest. On the worlds of men, the storm lights in the heavens vanished, leaving skies clear enough for mortals to see the stars unbroken. The Imperium watched from afar. The Inquisition called it anomaly, the Ecclesiarchy named it miracle, and the Adeptus Mechanicus declared it a system-wide correction of divine code. None dared claim it for long, for none could explain it. Where once chaos had howled, silence reigned. Where once hatred had fed the warp, stillness took its place, and within that stillness, hope began to crawl out from its grave. Sentry opened his eyes upon a cosmos that no longer sought his destruction. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of distant suns. The voice that had haunted him spoke no more. It had been absorbed, not silenced, becoming part of every breath he took. He felt the weight of all he had done, the worlds lost, the lives touched, the endless cost of his arrival. Yet for the first time, his sorrow was not unbearable. It was understood, accepted, and shared by the stars themselves. Across the void, a single word passed through thought and faith alike. It had no language, no owner, no doctrine. It was felt in every soul that looked up at the dawn that followed. Balance. And as the new light spread across the heavens, it was said that even the Emperor's flame on terror burned a little steadier. The universe had been wounded, but it had endured. A new day had come, born not of victory, but of understanding. Sentry drifted onward, silent, patient, eternal. The war of gods had ended, and in its place, creation itself had chosen to begin again. Centuries passed, measured not by calendars, but by whispers. Empires rose, burned, and turned to dust beneath the quiet hum of distant stars. Yet the story of the golden being did not fade. It was carried by wanderers, traders, soldiers, and prophets, each telling it differently, each believing it true. He was remembered as the Sun Father, the one who had walked between gods and demons and chosen neither. Some said he had been an angel who defied the Emperor to save mankind from itself. Others spoke of him as a weapon created by the Mechanicus, a machine too perfect to remain loyal to its makers. Among the Tau, he was called the Eternal Beacon, a legend of light that appeared in their darkest wars to turn defeat into survival. The Eldar named him the Balance, a being who had stared into She Who Thirsts and not blinked. To the Orcs, he was simply Dar Big Glow, a ghost they claimed no gun could hit and no Wa could drown. Across human space, shrines were raised to him, then destroyed, then rebuilt. Each age claimed ownership of his myth, and each time his name returned, the same question was asked: was he God, or man, or something caught between both? Inquisitors searched for proof. Records of unexplained salvation were gathered, worlds healed by invisible hands, fleets saved by bursts of impossible light. Yet no evidence endured, for every witness who swore they had seen the Sun Father also swore that he had vanished the moment they believed. The cult Mechanicus called the phenomenon an anomaly of quantum divinity. The ecclesiarchy called it heresy wrapped in hope. But to those who lived beneath war and ruin, he was the dream that refused to die. On nameless worlds, soldiers lit candles against the darkness and prayed, not for victory, but for the return of the one who had once balanced heaven and hell with a single breath. And sometimes, when the night was still and the stars were bright, a shimmer was seen above the horizon, soft, golden, fleeting. The air would grow warm for a moment, the sick would breathe easier, and the dying would see the dawn one last time. Then the light would fade, leaving only silence and the feeling that something vast had passed nearby. Records could never capture it, but faith did what logic could not. It remembered. And so the legend lived on, not as prophecy or command, but as the quiet belief that somewhere in the endless dark, a guardian still watched, a being who had once been man, who had become light and shadow both, and who chose even now to stand between the two. Ages drifted, and the stars changed their patterns. Worlds were born, fought, forgotten, and reborn again. The galaxy learned to live with its scars. But Through every rise and fall, one truth endured. The light never fully left. It was seen on dying battlefields, in the pause between bombardments, when the air trembled and the guns fell silent. It was seen above plague worlds, where the skies split for an instant and the dead ceased to rot. It was seen drifting across the void, a single glow moving faster than any ship, slower than time. No words were ever spoken when it appeared. The faithful called it the hand of the Emperor, the skeptics called it radiation, and the lost simply looked up and wept. The light did not answer prayers. It did not linger for songs or sacrifice. It came and went as quietly as breath, leaving warmth in its wake and silence where despair had been. Those who saw it were changed. Some spoke of voices that calmed the noise within their minds. Others felt their rage dissolve into understanding. For a moment, all who witnessed it shared the same thought, that they were being watched, not by judgment, but by remembrance. Among the voidborn and the cursed, it was said that the Sun Father still walked, that he crossed the stars not to rule, but to keep balance where none remained, that his light followed the path of suffering like a river seeking the sea. He was never found. No ship ever reached him, no machine ever measured his power. Only fragments of gold left adrift in the wake of silence, proof enough for those who chose to believe. The galaxy turned, slow and endless. Wars continued, gods whispered, empires decayed. But between the thunder and the screams there was always a pause, a breath that did not belong to the universe of war. And in that breath it was said that the Sentry still moved, carrying both light and shadow within him, guarding the fragile peace between creation and destruction. The stars themselves seemed to bow when he passed. No throne awaited him, no worship defined him, only the quiet duty of an eternal promise, to stand when all others fall, to remember when all else forgets, to keep the balance when even gods grow weary. The cosmos remained what it had always been, endless, wounded, and burning. But somewhere in that darkness a single spark endured. It was not hope. It was not salvation. It was simply watching. And as ages folded into ages, the last light of a forgotten man wandered on, keeping his endless vigil. In the endless dark, stories like this still burn. So stay with the light and subscribe for more tales of gods, war, and the worlds between.